Greetings and welcome to another River Radio Sports Central podcast alongside Matt Varney from 103.5 ESPN. I am Darren Kennard, and Matty V, we are 3 weeks from today as we record on Friday mornings, 3 weeks from the opening night of the high school football season.
How about it? We are there. We're less than a month away. You know, all of us play-by-play guys last week, we're so excited. We put something out one way or another. It was kind of like one person did it. Well, I should do that. And so, man, we're ready. We're excited. It's looking like a really interesting looking season that we're going to be getting ourselves into.
And with the new scheduling and such, and we'll break all that down again because I know there are still questions out there of how this is going to work. But practices start this Wednesday.
That's right.
And, it doesn't matter how much you've worked out over the summer. It starts back at 0 on Wednesday, which means the acclimatization and all that kind of stuff. But it does start Wednesday. Opening night on the 21st,
right.
and it's just on we go.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about the fact that, the dead week is basically dead now. I mean, I saw posts this morning from last night saying, this was our last summer workout, our last summer scrimmage, whatever. That's less than a week in terms of, you're looking at teams that are taking 6 days off, and I suspect, as we've said in the past, that as time goes on, you're going to see less 6 days, 5, 4. I wouldn't be surprised if someone's scrimmaging or something tonight. It's not there anymore. No one says you have to do it. I think a lot of health experts are saying, please take some time. But I would not be surprised if in 5 years from now, it's just jump right on into it and we'll just do film the days before. It's going to be a lot of football for a lot of kids. For a long time.
Yeah, and it's really all about how they choose to use the contact days. And so you can space them out a certain way and do that however you want. I think, honestly, the best thing is to give a couple days away.
Yes.
Just get a clean – if for nothing else, I mean, for – everybody, not just the players, but the coaches, just, hey, let's take a little bit and recharge, and then we'll be ready to go.
I mean, for the coaches and the kids, I mean, that might be your only time to take a vacation. I've talked to coaches before that are like, I need to get a procedure done, and that week was the only time to do it. It's obviously, like you said, a great time to recharge, but also a chance to maybe get in time for yourself and do whatever needs to be done, or like I said, take a family vacation, whatever. Because once next Wednesday hits, August 5th, or whatever that day ends up being in future years, once that happens, you're committed for the next 2-3 months at the very least.
And, again, they moved the dead week to around 4th of July. Mm-hmm. It was 4th of July was at the end of the dead week, so it was technically in June. So it's not like it was in the middle of the summer. It's not like it was at the end of the summer. It really wasn't that far removed for some of the athletes, in that just a couple weeks beyond the end of the baseball season.
Yeah, well, and I mean,
here's a dead week.
Yeah, exactly. and I mean, you're talking about kids that are also doing basketball sometimes as well. I mean, it's for a student athlete. I was a student athlete, but I didn't take part in some of those sports, but there's some that are, those are the three main male sports, and there's some that are doing all three basically all at the same time. Maybe there's maybe a couple days of overlap for all three in the summer, but typically, it's not full overlap. But I mean, if you're doing Legion ball and then you're doing basketball when you can, and football, there's going to be a little bit of overlap there somehow, some way, and it's exhausting for these kids.
And a lot of changes for the upcoming season, and let's just start at the top with the format of the season. Again, we've talked about it before, but we'll talk about it again because it is new, and people still have a lot of questions about it.
I mean, we'll be talking about it all through the season. We'll get to week 3 and be saying this person's eligible and so on and so forth.
Right.
We'll break it down in week 9 as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And basically what has happened is the IHSA membership, and again, this is important to know, this was an amendment that was brought forth by schools and then voted on by the entire membership to change this. And the changes involved adding 16 teams per class in the playoffs. So now 48 teams instead of 38 will make the postseason in each class. And because of that, they've added an extra round to the playoffs. The opening round now is what it's referred to. And the nomenclature bothers me a ton. You play the opening round, and the winner all advance to the first round, whatever.
Pick one or the other, and that first week is the opening round, the first round.
Right.
And if you want to call it the opening round, the next week is the second round, okay? What are we doing here?
So what that does is to keep the schedule the same at the back end with the state championships on Thanksgiving weekend. That means that you've added an extra round of playoffs, so that means that the regular season has to start a week earlier, which used to be the week 0, which was the scrimmages for some. And
for like 2 years.
Yeah, and a lot of times teams would hold their meet the teams and Gatorade games, things like that. And then a couple years ago, they opened it up to have some controlled scrimmages, and that felt like it was, really excited, for teams. And then a couple years in, they're like, I don't know if we're gonna do that. But now that's week 1, what used to be week 0. It's not the opening week. It is the the first week, and so that's why we're starting on the 21st, and that's why the kickoff of the season feels a little earlier than it has been, and so then we're gonna play, and I went through when they released the schedules and added up all the conference teams. You're talking a little more than 500 schools, 510, 515, somewhere in there, and you're going to play an entire regular season, and 384 of those teams are going to make the playoffs. And so what that means is, the past few years since COVID, we have had a handful of 4 and 5 teams make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Well, now you're adding 128 more teams to that postseason pool. Now you see where we're going with the records to get in.
Yes, and 3 feels like, as we've said, 3 feels like 5 now, which was to the people that brought the proposal forward. That was kind of the at least what they said was the idea behind it of let's stop racing to get to 5, to break down some of the conference carousel kind of. I don't think it's going to stop it, but maybe it will. We'll see. But that was the whole point of, some teams are in really tough conferences, boo-hoo, and they don't have a chance, and so we'll see. But yeah, the 3 feels like the 5, and you might, depending on how everything shakes out, as we've said before, you might see a 2-win team there somehow, some way. I would hate to see that, but at the same time, good luck to them if that's the case. There's nothing saying that a 2-win team couldn't shock everybody and make a run, but it just feels like it would just be kind of a dead man walking situation, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think the way it looks is like, the race to 5. Well, now it's going to be a race to 4.
Right.
4 feels like you're guaranteed to get in.
Yeah.
And then 3 will be that magic number of, okay, we're going to get to the end of the year, and potentially the cut point's either going to be somewhere in the 3s, or it's going to be somebody, that's 2 and 7, but it's got 60 playoff points or something. And, and again, the way the playoffs are structured, in classes 1 through 6, they're still doing top half, bottom half, north and south brackets. So it's 1 through 24 and 1 through 24. 1 through 8 will get buys in that first round of the playoffs, and then it'll be 9 versus 24, 10 versus 23, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you want some history, you can go back and look at, who's been some 9 seeds, who's been some 10 seeds, something like that. Those are the kind of teams that you potentially still could see. You take somebody, and I believe they were 9. Somebody like a Maroa Forsyth last year. They would be potentially somebody at a 9 at 7 and 2, which was a little bit uncharacteristic. but now the 24 is going to have to go to Maroa.
Right. Yeah.
A potential 2-7, 3-6 team
Yeah.
is going to have to go there in round one of the opening round.
Right. Yeah.
Not the first round, or not even round one.
Yeah.
The opening round.
Yeah. Well, and the bye also concerns me a little bit. I'm one to talk because I witnessed Murfreesboro essentially get a bye. They took a forfeit, but they essentially got a bye in that they, in the middle of the season in 2019, where they didn't play, and so everybody got a little rested up, got recharged a little bit, and they go on and go to a state championship. And you look back on that season, if you don't get that week off, you take that loss, but if you don't get that week off, I don't know that you go that deep in the playoffs. So it's a weird situation, but at the same time, at that point in the season, all the kids want to play. Taking a whole week off, and then you get like a Maroa Forsyth as the 9 seed, and they get to rev up against a team that just gets completely demolished by them. You wonder, how much is this benefiting the teams that get the bye? It may not benefit them as much. They should be the better team, but that doesn't mean that week off benefits them per se.
Right. And again, this goes back to the seeding process, which again, I know there's a lot of complaints about the seeding, but this is just strictly math. The IHSA goes by math.
Yeah.
There's no selection, there's no subjective nature to this. Nope. So it's not like there's a committee in the NCAA basketball tournament sitting there and going, okay, we're going to select these teams and we're going to seed them such and such. Look, if East St. Louis is 7-2, and it doesn't matter what their schedule is. It doesn't matter that they're the top 1 or 2 teams.
Right.
The math says they will be a number down below, and so that's what it's not anything about Maroa Forsyth. It just they come to mind because they were 7-2 a year ago, and again, we all know that was not the 9th best team in the Southern bracket, as evidenced by their trip to state.
Well, and something else that I just thought of is the fact that it comes down to points again. You're going to have multiple cutoff points for points. That's going to make a difference as well, in terms of who you play. If you're in a conference, you can only control what you can control. But the teams that are 7-2 but playing better competition, they do get that bye, and that helps. Whereas if we're just using Maroa Forsyth out there because that's who we're thinking of right now, but if they end up playing a team that maybe is a 2-win team and then the team ahead of them played a 3-win team, well, there's that extra point right there. So it's all gonna come down to a lot of different factors here that will make for some late season drama, if nothing else.
Right. And again, it doesn't address the main issue that I have is the fact that you don't know your class until the night of the playoffs.
Yeah.
And so
take what 3A last year?
Yeah, that can't happen.
No, and just the fact that it came down to a coin flip as well, that was no good.
Right. Benton and a team out of Chicago ended up with the exact record, exact same playoff points. The tiebreakers didn't do anything, and so it comes down to a coin flip. Benton, you're 3A, Chicago team, you're going to 4A. That can't happen. And so set the classes ahead of time and then say top 48 out of here, you're in.
Especially with just how much bigger the field has gotten now. If we're adding 2 teams, we don't like it, but we can keep the system. You've added so many teams now. You just go ahead and set. This is what it's going to be. We're probably going to have, if we have to adjust, we'll adjust later on, but this is the system basically. I get you want to have the best ones out of it, but now we're talking about teams that are well below 500. If you just set the parameters,
that discussion is out the window.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're inviting all 3 and 6 and perhaps some 2 and 7s, the best field possible is not part of the discussion in my mind. You mentioned the conference carousel. That's the other big change that we see in our area is there are a lot of schools in different places.
Sure.
And it started with the Mississippi Valley Conference, which, people are like, what? MVC? Missouri? No, the Mississippi Valley Conference closed up shop after many years. And so those schools kind of went their different directions. You had Mascoutah and Triad that went to the Southwestern Conference, which ended up breaking into 2 divisions. adding Granite City, Collinsville, Alton in the smaller division. The bigger division stayed the same with Belleville East and West, and then Edwardsville, O'Fallon, and of course East St. Louis. Mm-hmm. But the trickle down was some of those other Mississippi Valley teams ended up in the big division of the Cahokia.
Yep.
We had Waterloo, Civic Memorial, and Jersey. They come into the conference, and Salem's like, nope, we don't want any part of this. So now Salem is out, and they come to become the 6th member of the Ohio.
That's right.
And then once everything seemed to have been settled down and all this and that, and then all of a sudden the news we started hearing Centralia was going to go to the Cahokia Conference. And so they move, and so that left the South 7, which had taken in Highland,
right,
one of those other Mississippi Valley teams, before I get too far ahead of myself. Highland had come to the South 7, which was going to give them 6 for a number they haven't had in a long time.
They were like, finally, we've done it.
and then Centralia bolts, and so now the South 7 is back to 5. The Cahokia, Mississippi, is now 8. With those 4 big schools added, and now Salem comes to complete the Ohio, and so now that there's the conference carousel where we're just kind of all moving around.
Yep, and I don't know at this point how you, fill that open slot for the South 7. You look around and I think everybody's pretty content, and so the South 7 looks around and says, I guess we're where we've been the past half decade basically, and they just have to kind of live with it, because there's it seems like whenever we hear something come out of the Cahokia, it's always someone's unhappy. And when you've got 18 to 20 teams in a conference, there's probably going to be at least one team that's not happy. Is there one that's that size, though, is the question. And I think all the ones that are that size have kind of settled in to the Cahokia. So maybe in a few years they can try to poach, but at the same time, I don't know. It's one of those things where, now Highland's looking at it and being like, is this where we want to be, is what I've heard a little bit. And so I don't know. You hope for the South 7 because it's got so much history that it survives. But the people are starting to ask, what's going to happen to the South 7?
Yeah, and it's fair. I mean, Highland just basically, it takes Centralia's spot.
Yep.
And Highland is kind of in no man's land because the other teams out of the Mississippi Valley, Highland's sitting there with an enrollment of 830, 850, whatever it is. They're not big enough to go to the Southwestern Conference, even that smaller division. And so the South 7 felt like a decent fit for them. But then, now they're going, hey, wait a minute, I thought we were coming to a 6. And, you kind of, in my mind, I kind of wish the Cahokia would have gone full Big Ten SEC mode, taken in the Mississippi Valley, taken in the South 7, and gone 4 divisions, 3 for football.
Feels like it's going that way eventually.
Well, because here's the deal. I mean, East Alton Wood River is still in that big division to keep it 8 teams, which I'm just why?
It's a bad.
I mean,
doesn't benefit them.
Their enrollment is like 540 something, and last year, Maddie, they did not score until week 9 in the second half.
And they're in a tougher division now.
And now you add 4 schools bigger than anybody else that was here. What's going on?
And maybe that's the school that sits there and says, is not any better, but maybe we can at least get out of this one. And I don't know. But
the thing that I didn't understand about that is that, we see, I understand wanting to have even numbers for the conference because it makes scheduling infinitely easier. But if you have 2 divisions, and this is what the Southwestern Conference did by and large, is there's only 5 in each division. So, 1 week, there is one conference school that is not going to have a conference game. Well, you play the team from the other side.
Right.
And that same
Makes
thing,
sense.
you could have gone 7-7 in the Cahokia, and then, that odd week play somebody from the other division. And again, I know that that's not perfect, but I mean, my goodness, I mean, East Alton Wood River has no business being in that large division.
No, and you don't need 8 in a conference by any means, as you're alluding to there. With 7, you still have everything, unless your goal is to be like, we're eventually going to close this thing up. But again, East Alton Wood River does not belong in that division. So it's a mess, and I could see someone bolting from the Cahokia again. Yeah, that's the problem with the big conferences, is that not everyone's going to be happy, and someone's going to want to get out at all times. Last time it was Salem. It's going to be someone again in a couple years.
Well, and before that, when all this was starting out, Roxana was like, "We don't want the bigger schools in here. We want to be in the middle division." That wasn't going to work out, and so Roxana says, "Well, we'll just go independent football." And the rest of the Cahokia said, "Well, you can just go independent for everything, because that's not the way it works." And so Roxana is out there, and there's a smaller conference that they're in with Alton Marquette and Breeze Mater Dei, and a group of kind of, hey, we're kind of pulling in. Madison is
they did a good job of building that.
And and again, it's only got 5, and so that. When the River when Sparta left and the River was 6-5, the conventional wisdom is we're not just going to add a team just to get to that 6 because of the automatic playoff bid, because the conference champ almost always has gotten 6 wins and has gotten in. Well, now if you're down to 3 wins get you in all likelihood,
who cares? I
mean, you just play.
Yeah, just exactly. Play. Yeah, it doesn't matter at this point. There's gonna be the automatic bid, but it means nothing at this point. Just play and get it to work. And as we said, the conference carousel is supposed to slow down because of letting go of the race for 5. But when you get a team like East Alton Wood River, they're gonna say, we got to get out of here. If they can't score at all one year, and then they look around and they're like, this is tougher than last year. Maybe this year they see some steps in the right direction. And they say, this is something we could make work. It's going to take some time to get there. But in my experience, you be the punching bag long enough, and eventually you get fed up with it and say, I'm leaving.
Well, and it's hard to convince kids to come out when there's not been success and when it's been a struggle and this, that, and the other. And and that leads us to our next big story of the offseason was Vienna Goreville, who was in that boat. It had been a struggle, and they haven't played varsity since 22. Last year they played a JV schedule, had 17 sophomores, and so last year in that JV schedule, a lot of the teams they played were like, hey, we don't want you playing your juniors and seniors, and so the choice was, either those 17 kids are done or, we try to go varsity this year. And so they made the decision to come back varsity this year, and they're going to play a limited schedule. The thought was we'll play 4 games, maybe 5. And so because the Diamond had kind of moved on and brought Red Hill, they don't have to worry about the full Black Diamond schedule. And so they can kind of go out and pick and choose the teams that they play. They're going to open week 2 with the close matchup. Their neighbors, Massac County, and then it started out the whole premise was, talking to athletic director David Hill, the thought was we'll play weeks 2, 4, 6, and 8, and it ended up 2, 4, 5, and 8, and then with Litchfield bailing on its season, well, now you got a bunch of teams that are scrambling to add games in the South Central Conference, and Roxana was also a team that was open in week 9, and so ended up they added Roxana, and so they're playing Massac County, they're playing Fulton County out of Kentucky, Ballard Memorial, and then Saxony Lutheran, I believe, out of Missouri. And then they've added Roxana for week 9, and so it's a smaller schedule, with the idea of, hey, if we do have a smaller roster, we'll have the ability maybe to get some recovery time.
Well, and this is a question that I don't have the answer to, and maybe you know the answer to, but if they do well enough, is that a postseason situation for them?
I don't know if there's a minimum. I mean, if they go 2 and 3. or if they go 3 and 2, is 3 wins going to be enough? And I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, if they go 4 and 1 or 5 and 0, which I know right now might feel like a long shot for them, but if they do that, they've technically hit the requirement, you would think.
Right, and again, if the number, I don't know how, if there's used to be you had to get 5 to be playoff eligible.
Right.
Now, is that number going to be 4? Is that a phrase that we're not even going to use anymore?
Right.
Because 6 was the automatic qualifier,
Right.
and now, is it now 5 is the automatic qualifier? So
It's-
there's some things that are going to have to be hashed out.
Yeah, and that's something that obviously we can ask IHSA about, but it's one of those things where it's like, how much do you look at points more in that situation? That's something I'd like to know, because say Vienna Goreville does have this amazing resurgent, albeit limited season. Well, yeah, they should be in the postseason then and see what happens, and man, Vienna Goreville then might research even more next year.
Yeah, so really just a very interesting off-season of events. And quite frankly, the only way that I think that the conference carousel thing is going to go away is if they would have stayed with districts or go with districts.
Yeah,
and then
if they basically regulated themselves. Yeah.
Right. And then it's like, okay, well, if then you decide, well, we want an expanded playoff field, we're going to take 6 teams out of each district, whatever. So then you're playing the season and taking that. But again, it's going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out. And I think that, you and I are not necessarily one of those, and especially me, I'm not the old guy. I'm not going to call you an old guy. I'm not the old guy going, oh, this is going to stink because, we've never done it. I'm not that. I just was not a fan of adding a bunch of losing teams.
Right.
Again, the argument was, well, we want more people to experience the playoff, atmosphere and those kind of things and all this and that. And I just look at every other sport where everybody makes the postseason.
Yeah.
Is there much joy when you're the 15 seed and you're going to the 1 or 2 seed and getting whacked by 40?
Right.
I don't know.
And I think some fans have correctly called it out of, like, how much is this what you've said versus, well, there's a really good 3-6 Catholic League school that if they play with a lot of 7 and 8A teams, if they could just get in, they'd really make some. I think there's been correct criticism in that, but when you get down to it, we're both wary of it, but it could end up being a great thing.
We'll just have to see how it all plays out. And again, I would go back to, at the end of the day, all 800 plus IHSA schools had the ability to vote on this.
Yeah.
So the concept that the IHSA is sitting up there making these types of changes from a big office, just so it's going to protect some 3 and look, could a 3 and 6 that Catholic conference could they beat a lot of 8 and 1s? And absolutely,
Sure.
absolutely. Sure. There's no doubt. But I don't that wasn't. It was primarily public schools that were the ones that brought forth the amendment.
Yeah.
And again, all schools voted on it, and there are 3 times more private or public schools than private. That's I don't want to hear I don't want to hear those things.
Now, the only thing that when you speak about that, again, not all 800 of them play football.
Absolutely.
And I don't remember the exact numbers, but I don't think it added up to the ones that abstained were. I don't think it added up. So there's some politicking going around, and obviously some votes being bought one way or another, and because you don't care, so just vote for my side,
right.
And, so is what it is, and we'll see how it goes. If it doesn't go well, then you might, as soon as this December, see it back on the ballot of just get rid of it.
Right.
And so we'll see.
Yeah, and the other storyline was that the IHSA did this to get another round of playoff money.
Right. Which maybe.
But they didn't do it.
Right, exactly.
The schools did it, and the schools are adding the round of playoffs. Does the IHSA benefit in the long term financially? Yeah, maybe. I mean, I mean, you would think that there being those extra playoff games, there would be some, but you don't know what the playoff or what the acts.
Right.
But it wasn't. This wasn't an edict from above.
Right. Exactly. And so we'll see. I've been around teams that are 3 and 6 and 4 and 5, And obviously they'd be the ones going on the road, but even 5-4 teams. I've been at those games where they're a 5-4 team, and you look out at the crowd and you're like, yeah, the support is a little lackluster here today, and it is what it is, you know. And so are they going to get a little bit extra money? Yeah, of course. They've added games, so it's bound to happen. But even if they made that decision, I think they'd also look into like, well, we're only making this much by projections.
Right.
It's probably not going to be enough to really, But 8 classes, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. Before we go here, one thing non-football related. This weekend starts the Colt World Series.
Yes.
Over at Mountain Dew Park and over at the Oasis ball fields. And, of course, we have 2 area teams in here, the Southern Illinois squad and the Marion squad. This is 16U tournament. And, look, covered this the past few years. This is a really neat event. You've got teams from multiple countries here and then really get to showcase their skills.
It is. And either the Marion team or the Southern Illinois team always seems to be in it at the end. The first couple of years, they were the ones that were winning it when it came to Marion. So it's been a lot of fun for the community. And just great. Last night they had the home run derby. There was a kid from the Bronx that won it, but you had a Marion kid and you had a Mount Vernon kid play second and third. So lots of great talent, and you get to sit down and kind of say, hey, we're not too far off from the rest of the world, which is great to feel as well.
Right, and to see the fans from other countries coming here to Southern Illinois, supporting their team is really cool. Games starting today. The opening ceremonies are tonight at 5:30, and then there's actually a Thrilbillies game later, and so the
Marion
games
and
move
Austria,
over. Yeah, they move over to the field over at Oasis. So again, start the big week of baseball, and it wouldn't be a podcast with us without talking about the weather. The weather's a little questionable today, and
it might be in that dome a lot of the weekend.
The dome getting put to use, but then again, this will go on through the middle of the next week, and so some good baseball to be seen.
Yeah,
sure.
Without a doubt. Like I said, it's just great to have 2 area teams, a lot of area athletes on there. Some that are getting ready to play football, mind you, but that they go out there and they compete. And like I said, you get to kind of see, hey, we're not that far off from the rest of the world. You haven't heard too many Southern Illinois names make it to MLB, but I like to think that in the coming years you're going to see a lot more, because a lot of scouts that are like, we got to get ahead of this. We got to know who's on the path. There's some that are coming to this event every single year now in Marion, and they're starting to pick up, hey, wait a minute, there's some around here as well, and that's always great.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for this River Radio Sports Central podcast. For Matty V, I'm Darren Kennard. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.